everybody, and welcome back to Vestanland. This is episode 15, and in this episode, I build the sort of industrial area that I was talking about in the last episode. This is leading off of the major interchange that I built, and this area is going to contain primarily the recycling / waste management facility, as well as some tanks, which I imagine are storing either oil or other forms of energy. And to start off, I sort of flattened out this area. This is basically like sort of a major reclaimed land region here, and I tried to reflect that by making it perfectly flat and sort of squaring off all the corners so it doesn't look natural, because these types of places, you can tell when they're built for this purpose, have a very distinct look. One of the areas I use for inspiration, I'm not really sure what it's called, but it's an area that looks a lot like this in Copenhagen, sort of on the west side of that city, right on the coast. And I tried to sort of capture that vibe, at least from the Google Earth screenshots that I was looking at. And I think at the end, it looks pretty good. As you can see here, I'm using these pavement surfaces and some basic retaining walls to kind of define the shape of the area that I'm going to be working with. You also saw at the beginning, I stretched out the highway to sort of a roundabout, which leads into this area. All these things are sort of placeholders or temporary, but the sort of general idea remains the same. But I sort of shuffle things around as the episode goes on, trying to get sort of the perfect layout. I'm sort of finishing up the interchange by adding the last few markings to the end. I didn't do this in the last episode because I wasn't sure exactly how this was going to feed into this area. Now I'm placing down a bunch of these really nice generic buildings by Ivaniev on the workshop. All of these are part of the modular recycling facility, and as you can see, some of them are like for glass recycling, some are for paper, all kinds of stuff like that. I'm also using a bunch of these oil tanks, just kind of laying them out in the basic shape there, just try to get an idea of the scale of them. You'll see I sort of realign a lot of those things later on in the episode, but just wanted to get a sense of how those are going to look in that space. I tried to make this as sort of logical as I could in terms of having a distinct area for all the different types of recycling. You'll see I put the metal and glass facilities kind of right next to each other, and I have like some of the other ones off to the other side. You'll see down the line, I'm not really sure exactly how this works, but from what I could tell, there's usually with these kind of coastal areas, there's a place for ships to come in and drop off like just bulk amounts of material, and then trucks can kind of like sort it into different areas for recycling. So I tried to sort of do that with these buildings. I'm not sure exactly how realistic it is, but again, my sort of primary goal was to get the sort of vibe of the area right, and I think that it accomplishes that when it's all said and done. You can see here I'm sort of aligning these. This is the glass facility, and then the one with all the big cranes I move off to the side is for the metals. Now I'm sort of running these kind of beat up road through and kind of under the different little conveyor belt things. I think that does a really good job of sort of selling this place. I mean, the buildings are kind of built around the roads and vice versa. I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of making this realistic. You can see I'm continuing to tinker with the layout of these sort of land edges here. I end up not using these retaining walls down the line. I end up sort of replacing them, which you'll see later on. But for this stage of the build, they're a really nice asset to use just because they provide that sharp line at the edge just to get a sense of what it should look like. You can see I was mentioning that I sort of moved around this area in terms of the main road leading in a couple times. I realized I needed a little bit more space, so I shifted it further inland. And then this ended up working out pretty well. I put this dirt road right, I guess I'm not doing it right now, but I end up placing it, here it is. I place it through this facility. So you see trucks going through that kind of scrapyard area. and it's, yeah, the trucks kind of circulate around all these areas, and it gives the impression that they're working as intended, even though I'm not really sure that they are. But yeah, it looks like it's working, which is the most important thing. You can see I'm redoing the roundabout entrance. I thought this made a lot of sense to sort of, because like all the industrial traffic is coming in from one place, so I wanted a fairly high capacity junction, and there isn't much of a space concern here, so having this roundabout I thought was pretty realistic. I decided to use some of the like the service roads from the parking lot roads pack through the more like I'm not really sure what the word for it is, but there's more of like probably some like offices and stuff here. So I figured you'd want like a more defined road, because not all of the traffic here was going to be heavy trucks. I also added some parking on this end. I haven't really put much parking in the city, especially since I've been working on kind of the dense urban core where there's a lot of transit. But I figured there definitely would be some cars that would need to get here. So I added some parking. You'll see I added another little parking area down the line. And yeah, now I'm extending out some of the roads, and let's see, what else? Yeah, and I'm adding, basically, I have like my sort of mindset was the area that I'm working on right now is the sort of recycling complex, and this area over here is more of like an administration and like offices. It's kind of separate from the like heavy industrial region, and you'll see I move on to the sort of power and energy type area on the other side. This is what I was talking about having the ships come in and dropping off the bulk material. I'm using these really nice pile assets here to kind of have these like different types of materials that have been dropped off, and they're kind of laying out here waiting to be sorted. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's exactly right, but that seems to be how these areas work in real life, so I tried to mimic it. Now I'm using these dock assets to create the area where the ships are going to come in and drop off the material. I've had these assets in my collection for a long time, but I hadn't really used them as intended, which I'm pretty sure it's what I'm doing now. You'll see I'll delete the walls from behind them and use the surfaces to form that really nice edge, and then sort of mess it up a little bit with some decals to make it look more realistic. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is like what you're supposed to do with these dock edges, but I hadn't really gotten around to doing it in any of my previous builds. Now you can see I'm using procedural objects to align these surfaces perfectly to where I want them to go, and then kind of you'll see I'll use any of the sort of rough edges. I use decals to kind of blend into the road and create kind of a seamless look. I also put these two big cranes here. My thought with those was that they would, like, a ship would pull up here, they would somehow be able to like take the material and then drop it off, and then the trucks would sort of be circulating around, taking the different types of materials to different areas where it would be processed. Now you can see I deleted some of the walls here, and I decided to add some breakwater rocks. One thing I realized just looking at Google Earth is that these areas, they do have a lot more nature than I would have guessed. So even though a lot of this land is definitely reclaimed, and you can see that the sharp edges on like where like the docks are, the rest of the area is more like, not even that the coastline was naturally this shape, but you can imagine there was like land maybe like is filled in from other places, and some rocks and vegetation has sort of been added to kind of keep erosion away, and then some plants have sort of come in, kind of reclaiming the land themselves. Yeah, so I sort of created that as a sort of good contrast between the kind of well-defined industrial area, but then also like the nature kind of coming in and roughing the edges up a little bit. You can see I've sort of laid out some of these oil tanks, which I didn't do on camera, but my thought process there was that I wanted to use, like, there's a couple different sizes of them, and I wanted to sort of mix and match them to kind of create some variety. which was similar to what I saw in real life. And I'm creating this little inlet here. I'm imagining that tankers carrying oil or whatever else might be stored here will be able to pull up into this little inlet area, and their cargo would be transported into the tank somehow. Again, I apologize because I'm not an expert in how that actually works, but I feel like that makes sense. And yeah, hopefully that's not too far off base. You can see I had these kind of 3 big tanks here as a bit of a placeholder. I'm now shifting them around and adding some of the smaller ones near the end of this kind of little peninsula thing. And they all come with these little like pipes at the bottom. I'm trying to align most of them just because I feel like that makes a lot of sense, but it's not perfect. But again, I think the sort of important thing for this area is that it looks good from above. Like it sort of fulfills that purpose. And I think it does that. I'm not too worried about the like small details in this area, just kind of creating a big space that has that kind of industrial vibe to it, and also within game provides some services to the city, which I had been up to this point using the little like blocks, the block cube services for. So it's good to see the industrial vehicles like coming up to this area for the recycling, waste management, all that kind of stuff. You can see I'm using the same technique with the procedural object surfaces to make this edge really nice. You can see the terrain like clips through it a little bit, but I think that's okay just because it's kind of obscured by all the buildings they have in this area. You can see this little area at the end here. Again, I sort of kind of wanted to like mix the natural edge with the rocks and the sharp edge with the dock edges. And I did that on both sides. I think it looks pretty good. Yeah, I think, again, I'm going to say this a couple more times just because it's true. I don't know exactly what I'm doing here, but I think the most important thing is that I get the vibe of this area right. And I think what I've done does a pretty good job of capturing that. Now I'm moving back to the sort of connection with the highway a little bit. I guess before that, I add some of that vegetation I was talking about to kind of add some more realism and finishing up this side of the dock. Yeah, I mentioned it earlier, but the amount of like plant life and nature in these areas that I saw looking at Google Earth really surprised me. I guess it shouldn't be that much of a surprise, but it was interesting nonetheless. Yeah, I'm not sure if the way I'm sort of ending these docks makes a lot of sense. I think at least it looks pretty plausible, which is kind of the most important thing for me. And yeah, while I'm placing down some of these more like vegetation props, I would like to say a big thank you to everyone who's watching the video. Yeah, if you're enjoying it, give the video a like, and if you'd like to support the channel, I encourage you to subscribe. It means a lot to me. It's cool to see more people enjoying the content I'm putting out. I mean, I enjoy playing the game, but yeah, it gives me even more motivation to play when I see people are enjoying the cities I'm able to create. So thanks again for watching. I'm now adding a bit of a retaining wall to cover up some of the texture clipping on the highway because there's a pretty big height difference, and yeah, I wanted the highway kind of slopes in all the way to the end of the industrial area, but that means it's really high above this kind of first part. Yeah, so I had to use a wall to kind of hide that. Then this little like kind of sliver of green space, I didn't really end up knowing what to do with it. I kind of just left it as is. And yeah, I think it kind of, I don't know, it doesn't really, I thought this area doesn't have to be completely chock full of buildings. You can see now I'm just adding a few kind of generic warehouse buildings to fill out this space. I originally was going to have like a water treatment plant here, but I figured that didn't really make a ton of sense right under the highway, because I figured there'd be a lot of like, I mean, if there's cars and trucks going over it, you wouldn't want your water to have like debris falling in from the road. So I think I'll like add that whole facility later on in a different area. But yeah, for now I just have some generic warehouses filling out this area. And I think they do a pretty good job of, again, getting the sort of industrial vibe of this area and not being too complicated. I'm now using, again, the breakwater rocks and later on some vegetation to kind of integrate this area back into the kind of natural shoreline. And then I'm placing down these stain decals kind of all over the place, kind of indiscriminately. And I think these do a really good job of adding some texture and some life to this area. And yeah, I think they were, like, when you look at this area from like relatively close in, that's kind of what you notice. It's kind of beat up and a little bit gross, which is kind of supposed to be because there's heavy trucks going around and there's a lot of waste, you know. So I think those decals are really what sells this place as an industrial area. And yeah, it's always satisfying to put those down and see it come to life. You saw there, I was adding this little facility kind of outside of the main industrial area. It's designed, I think, as a building where people can come in and drop off their own recycling. I'm not sure how realistic that would be in a city like this, but I don't know. I put it in because it looks kind of cool, I guess. Yeah, so maybe I'll change that around sometime down the line. Who knows? Now I'm adding a little bit of like a kind of gated entrance to the area. I'm thinking there would probably be some kind of like, not a toll, but like only authorized vehicles would be allowed in here. Yeah, these little like props, they aren't animated or anything, so they're kind of always open, but I think that's okay. And yeah, I'm using the intersection marking tool to add some lines, again, adding some more texture to this area. Yeah, one of those easy bits of detail that adds a ton to areas like this. I also added that little dirt road into the sort of drop-off recycling facility, again, so trucks could theoretically access that and pick up more recycling that's coming in from individuals and sort of put it into the major overall system. You saw me do some sort of very low-grade detailing of that kind of center roundabout area with some bushes and flowers. Nothing complicated, but yeah, it sort of fills the space and kind of does what it needs to do. I guess what you'll see me move on to here in a second is kind of how I'm going to connect this area with the rest of the city. Obviously, it's connected via the highway, but I want this area to be accessible by transit. So what you're seeing me do now is adding this elevated pedestrian bridge that's also going into the industrial area and connecting to this hill, or at least connecting to the road on the hill. And what I'm going to do, I don't do it in this episode because I want to do sort of an episode dedicated to the metro and other transit services. But what I do here is I sort of lay the foundation for a metro stop and a tram stop here. I imagine there'll be a lot of people that work in this area, so having access via the metro I think is really important. And also same with the tram, giving people more options to get to this area. Obviously there's enough parking for people to drive here, but I also, yeah, you can see I'm going to do like a custom metro station here down the line. But yeah, that's going to be sort of the focus of its own episode, along with some of the other metro stations that I kind of placed down in other areas of the city. You can see I'm sort of sinking it down, and I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to fit this all together. Again, it's a subject for a later episode. Yeah, I'm excited with how the sort of different transit connections are coming together, and yeah, I'm looking forward to working on that in a future video. Now you can see I'm adding another little parking area. Yeah, I mean, I imagine this would be for either people who work here or possibly for industrial vehicles who are maybe being stored temporarily. I'm not really sure, but I think it doesn't affect the job of filling a kind of awkward space in this area. Now I'm adding some fences. Again, I don't want people just to be able to walk in here because there's a lot of, trucks and stuff, so it makes sense there'd be some sort of security just to kind of keep the area a little bit off limits from the general public. Now I'm flattening out this little area. You can see I connected the metro line to kind of the placeholder line I had going underground. That gives you sort of a sense of where the metro is going to be going down the line. And yeah, I'm sort of filling this area out with some more generic warehouses. This is an area that I think I probably will revisit in a later episode, but for now, I think this looks pretty good. Again, I'm just kind of filling out some trees and walls to kind of just give this area a little bit, make it look like a somewhat realistic, while I sort of wait for other things to come together before I can really build it out the way I want to. The last thing I do is I kind of add these gates that are kind of, again, they're always open, but it gives the idea that this is a somewhat off-limits area to the general public. And now I'm adding an elevator to connect this pedestrian path to the industrial area. And yeah, I'm kind of just setting the stage for what I'm going to do down the line. So yeah, stay tuned to watch later episodes concerning the transit in this area. Again, I really appreciate you guys watching the video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like, subscribe to the channel. That would mean a lot to me. And yeah, hopefully I will see you in the next episode. Bye.